I knew someday I would be sitting here. It was only a matter of time. Because Newcastle is owned by the single wealthiest ownership group of any sports team in the world. They are. They are owned by the wealthiest sports owners you could possibly have. And they have finally been able to win a trophy. Their first trophy since mammoths walked the earth, which, by the way, was still happening when the pyramids were built, which is just a super cool historical fact. You can Google that. I promise I'm right. There were mammoths alive when the Great Pyramids were being built. Right. Absolutely crazy. But yeah, also Newcastle won their last trophy around that time, 1969, and they have won another one, the League Cup, which the celebration was a little bit weird. I don't know. I hated this. They put them up in the stands for some reason. Screw that. Put them on the field so that everybody can kind of, so we can get like a normal celebration out of this. Newcastle is not going to have to wait 300 years for their next trophy because of the situation, all the stuff that we're going to talk about. But, they might have to wait 300 years for a normal trophy celebration. We're going to start putting the people in the freaking stands. What was that? Why are they standing on the lip, like the lip of the stadium, raising the trophy and celebrating all over the place? Doesn't make any sense to me. It just looks dumb. Looks incredibly stupid. I have no idea why they're doing that. They shouldn't be doing that. Terrible executive decisions being made all over the place. All right. That's not why I'm here, though. Why I'm here is because there's a very delicate kind of gray area balancing act that needs to be done. Because I love sports. I'm obsessed with sports. It's not even just football, soccer, American football, basketball, right? Hockey, baseball. I love sports. Rugby. I've watched the All Blacks play. I freaking love it. I went to an Irish, Gaelic hurling match or whatever it was. It was awesome. Front row. I loved it. And one of the best tropes in all of sports is the team that hasn't won anything in a long time and has this big fan base and is finally able to win something. Those are the stories that move you almost more than anything. I still remember the Chicago Cubs. I don't know if you follow baseball. I hadn't won a World Series in over 100 years, right? So we're not even in living memory, right? My grandpa was from Chicago. He was in his early 90s. He'd never seen the Chicago Cubs win the World Series. He went to a World Series game in the 1940s when the Cubs lost, and he went, we've got a good team. We'll be back next year. It's a true story. And obviously they weren't. But he did live long enough to see them win the World Series. And it was this amazing, special experience, right? You got somebody who's over 90 years old staying up past midnight to be able to celebrate the fact that his team has finally won one time. And Newcastle's obviously in a similar situation. They just lifted a major trophy for the first time in living memory of the vast majority of their fans. Right? I don't want to say vast majority, but at least a strong majority of their fans are going to be under the age of, what do you need to be, like 57 or something, 56, 57 years old. And even then, you don't remember the first couple of years of your life. So if you're like a 62-year-old, 63-year-old Newcastle fan, you barely remember their last trophy. So this is a beyond special occasion. It is. And what I'm about, the other stuff that we're about to talk about should not take away from that. I mean, because you get little things like this. This from Focus Football. You get a 97-year-old fan talking about what this match meant kind of before it. Obviously, they've won now.
I've always said to my friend here that I wanted to die on the terraces when Newcastle was scoring the winning goal. I'm 97 years of age. What a way to go out. That would be really, really great.
Done. That's my wish too. I've always said I need and I have to see Newcastle.
This is, of course, Alan Shearer, Newcastle legend and really, really good player.
Win a trophy. If Newcastle win on Sunday, then we can both go happily, eh? How does that sound?
I mean, like these are the sorts of people, from these old dudes to Alan Shearer, that this is your moment for the rest of your life, right? And this is your club that has gone on to achieve these things. But it is remiss, right? And we're going to kind of come back to that, to pretend that this happened in a vacuum. Because the reason that honestly I'm sitting here is there were a lot of news stories and a lot of coverage of it just talking about, oh, Newcastle, fantastic that they were finally able to do this thing. Right? And there was no mention of how. And there was no mention of why. Okay? Even if, let's say it was just an incredibly wealthy owner. Let's just say some random dude who invented Beyblades or something is worth $100 billion, which in order to be as wealthy as the Saudi private investment fund, I think you need to be worth like $500 billion, which no individual on the planet is, as far as I know. I don't really keep track of that sort of thing, but I don't think so, right? Let's say some dude invents the next Beyblade and the next Tamagotchi or something. They're worth $500 billion. They buy Newcastle, right? You would at least want to mention in those news stories that, I don't know, Newcastle was able to achieve this kind of success because of a huge injection of capital. Now, it is not the same as Manchester City when they came onto the scene. It just isn't, because there's FFP in place. And as toothless as people think FFP is, if it didn't exist, Newcastle would have already bought half the best players they could get their hands on. Anybody that was willing to take the money to go play in the north of England would already be there, because they've got, in a footballing sense, unlimited money. In the sense of we'd be able to do whatever you want in the world of football, they have unlimited money. And so there is no monetary obstacle to them being able to build the best team in the world, except for FFP. Now, that just means it's going to take longer. Football Manager is obviously a game I play a lot, and in that simulation, eventually Newcastle always becomes the biggest wage budget in the Prem. Because the more money you spend, the more money you make. They're in the Champions League now. They're getting bigger sponsors. They're getting, more jersey sales, whatever. They're selling more tickets. They're raising the prices of the tickets because the tickets are more on demand. Like, that's just market forces, right? And now you bring more money in. You're able to spend more money. Then you start selling players for more money because they're incredibly valuable, so you can spend more money. And before you know it, Newcastle is allowed, based off the FFP, because it's basically maxing its investment every year, it is allowed to spend as much money as the clubs it's competing against, right? So even though it doesn't happen immediately after the purchase, it still happens in this kind of overtime process. And it's just dumb to pretend like Newcastle got this good out of a vacuum. They didn't. Then Newcastle has not exploded onto the scene perhaps the way people thought, but that's because they have to gradually spend that money that they have. But they have an unlimited checkbook within FFP. They're basically just competing in a salary cap. The world of football likes to pretend that salary caps don't exist. They do. When I'm talking about these stories in Spain, when I'm talking about stories in England where we're talking about FFP, there is a cap. And each team has a different one, which also feels unfair to my American brain. But we'll just take that and leave it to one side, right? But there is a salary cap, and a team like Newcastle is basically competing with a spending cap, a transfer salary cap. They cannot go over this amount of money, but they can go up to it, right? Other clubs might not want to go up to it. Tottenham, of course, is a club that probably isn't going to go up to it because Daniel Levy's running a real net positive sort of organization. Newcastle doesn't give a shit. They don't. And then it is also just, people avoid it because it's hard to grapple with. They do. The fact that Saudi Arabia owns Newcastle. Like the private investment fund of Saudi Arabia owns Newcastle. And look, I've got people from Saudi Arabia that are in my community. And if you live in a certain area and you want to do things a certain way, I can't stop you. But I can tell you I disagree with you strongly about the way certain things are done. And the idea that, people are just dying and stuff, right? Like that, that's bad. I realize I'm a soccer commentary channel, but I feel like, dying, it's not great. I'm also from the United States, so it's not like I'm standing on some sort of massive moral high ground right now anyways. Did you get the idea? I just think the idea of governments owning clubs is weird and bad and probably shouldn't be allowed. But there is, within that, all these different conversations that people are having about what it means that they're here. And to be perfectly honest, somebody has to be protecting the game. Because people are going at the fans for celebrating their first trophy or whatever, and you really shouldn't. Because imagine if you were this 97-year-old guy that we just watched. You've been rooting for Newcastle for 97 years. You haven't seen him win a trophy in like 60. And all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, some random foreign government that has been in a hot seat for a while buys your club. Are you just supposed to stop rooting for them? I mean, I know there's some people that would say yes, right? And I wish that we all had such pure moral fiber. But to be honest, I feel like even some of those people, you would struggle with this if you were actually in this position. If the one team you always rooted for was purchased by an entity like this that you disagreed with incredibly strongly, right? What do you do? What you need to do is have entities that are shepherding the game that protect people from ever being put in that situation. I think a good place to start would be stopping governments from owning clubs. That would be a good place to start. There's people that want to go a lot farther, and then you see debates that kind of get lost in the whole, well, anybody that has that amount of money has been amoral. But let's be honest, there's levels to this shit, right? There are differences in the game. There's differences in the game. I'm a soccer commentary channel, but this shit found me. I didn't find it. I didn't make an investigative journalist piece and go to Saudi Arabia and be like, look, they bought Newcastle. Welcome to the party. So I will say I am incredibly happy for the fans, for the players like Bruno Guimaraes and his interview afterwards. It's one of the best days of my life. They deserve it. For them, this is like the World Cup. People who've died, people who've grown up, and they've not seen Newcastle as champions. Someday I want to leave this club, and I want the fans to sing my name the way they do to Shearer. Like, that is tear-jerking. That's sports, man. That's what it's all about. That's freaking awesome. And I'm happy for all of those people, and I'm happy for all of those fans. And yet I'm still grappling with the processes and the systems that have kind of brought us to this point, right? And I feel like it's dumb to just ignore those. But I feel like it's also possible to bring those up without degrading the players and the fans who, to be honest, I don't necessarily hold responsible for the league allowing them to buy this team. I wish the world of football was simpler and we didn't even have to grapple with any of these sorts of weird situations. So super happy for these dudes, super happy for the fans, super happy for whatever, but also kind of sad that the world of football is just pretending like there's nothing going on here and it's just the latest, greatest example of just kind of sports washing, basically.